Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. For those that are new here, my name is Elenia and this is Soft Skill Atelier. I'm a trained fashion designer and I'm teaching you all the skills you need to bring your fashion ideas to life. I finally dared to put my hands on a bustier top sewing pattern and create my first design with some bra cups and some corset boning in it. It wouldn't be a soft skill atelier design if I wouldn't add some sort of upcycling to repurpose old garments instead of buying new materials. So this is what I'm working with. A old men's button-down shirt. And this is what I want to end up with. A bustier top with some puffy sleeves. So by the end of this video, you will not only witness how I transform this into this, but you will also learn how to sew a bustier top from beginning to end. So better bear with me. The bustier pattern I'm using is from the Etsy shop Pattern for All. Shout out to the creator Huda, who is kind enough for letting me use her pattern for my video. I will link her YouTube channel and her Etsy shop in the description so you can check her out and also get your own pattern to sew along with me. So I think I have talked enough now, and I would say let's get started by looking at all the tools and materials we need for today's session. Let's do it. For my project today, I need thread, a zipper that is separable and about 20 centimeters long, corset boning. If you can't find any anywhere, you can also use zip ties, pins, and a sewing needle, paper tape, a set square, and some extra cotton fabric, ideally similar to the one from the shirt. Bra padding foam. I am using thin scuba fabric. Paper and fabric scissors. A fabric marker, ideally one that disappears when heat applied. And some paper. The pattern comes in a PDF to be printed out in A4. The pieces need to be first cut out in your preferred size. Or if you want, you can also copy out your preferred size to a new paper to keep the original print. I don't need the facing pattern because I will line the whole top. Keep in mind the pattern comes already with a 1 cm seam allowance included. I am using the pattern size 40 for this video. The pattern is a bit shorter than what I intended my design to be. That's why before I start cutting out fabric, need to make some slight alterations on the pattern pieces. And while I'm on it, I also decided that I would like to have a rounded hemline in the front of my bustier. I added an 8 cm extension in the front, and on the side I added 2 extra centimeters. Then I started drawing out my preferred round hemline. Where the two pattern pieces line up, I need to interrupt my line because I need to take the seam allowance into consideration. On the back pattern, I simply add 2 centimeters on the hemline as well. The first thing I do on the shirt is cutting off the sleeves that will later be sewn back onto the bustier. I need some extra fabric around the sleeves, that's why I cut them off generously, like this. Always making sure that I take the same amount of fabric away on both sides. For this design, I decided to embrace the fact that I already have a nice button facing, so I will integrate it into the center front pieces. I line up the center front edge of the pattern along the center of the buttons and the buttonhole, making sure the buttons and the holes will stay on the same height of my new design so I can actually use the buttons. After that, I cut out all the pattern pieces twice. To speed up the process, I first fold the shirt in half and cut out everything double. The cup piece I cut out a second time for the lining. Because there was not enough fabric on the shirt to also do the lining of the rest of the pieces, I used another piece of white cotton I had left from another project. You can also use another shirt. There's one more thing to be cut out. It's that foam for the cup padding. As I said already, I am using this thin neoprene, but you can also actually get a real bra foam. For this one, I need to remove all the seam allowance from the pattern that will touch the other foam pieces. I don't need the seam allowance because I am sewing the pieces together with a zigzag stitch. I cut them out of neoprene individually because the material won't allow me to cut it in double layers as accurate as I need them to be. Next, I start with the sewing process. I take the two center front pieces and connect them to the side front pieces by simply sewing a straight line on 1 centimeter to the edge. I repeat the whole thing with the back pieces as well. Also, the two lower bits of the bra cups can be sewn together on 1 centimeter. I do all these processes with the lining bits at the same time as well, so that in the end I have the whole bustier pattern sewn 2 times. Now it's time to connect the front and the back pieces on the side seam. Do this again on the lining as well. As soon as I have connected all the pieces, I press the seams. For the outside pieces, I press the seam allowance all on one side because I will use the seam allowance to create the tunnels for the boning sticks. The lining seam allowance needs to be pressed apart like this. Next, I top stitch the seam allowance from the outside pieces 8 mm away from the original seam. So I have created some tunnels to later insert boning. I continue with assembling the bra cups by cutting back the seam allowance and sewing on the upper part. I use loads of pins to make sure the fabric stays at the right place and then sew them together carefully. I also cut the seam allowance back on the upper piece. To press the seam allowance, I need a round surface so I can flatten the seams properly. I improvised with the mannequin. I let the cups cool off before I removed them from the mannequin again. While they're cooling off, I moved to the foam bra pieces. As I mentioned already, they will be sewn together with a zigzag, so there is no visible seam line to keep the cups smooth and without bumps. I chose a white zigzag to make sure I always hit both fabric pieces. I can assemble the outer piece with the foam cups. I am making sure that all seams line up and secure them with pins. Now the main parts come back into the game and the cups find their place in the front part. Also here it's advised to use more pins than you would usually do. To connect the two round shapes, it's always good to first pin the fixed points like the edges and the middle seam and fill them in with pins between these points. After the cups are sewn in, I add a top stitch along the cup seam to define and support the cup's round shape. The excess seam allowance will be cut off afterwards. Next, I focus on the sleeves. To make them puffy on the upper side, I need to be able to gather them. So I need to remove a bit of the armhole circumference. I do that by opening the armhole seam and removing the yoke piece on the shoulder. Then I create a new shoulder seam by closing the armhole again. Now I can already see that I have some excess fabric I can work with to create the puffiness. But I want the puffs to be even bigger, so I open a bit more of the seam on both sides. Next, I need to gather the excess fabric to create some even puffs. I use a contrast color thread and make some 1 cm wave-like stitches along the edge of the sleeve. Important is that there is a big knot on the end of the thread. By pulling on the thread now, I can gather the fabric to the size I need it to be to line up with the new armhole size. As soon as I have reached the size, I pin the gathered fabric to the armhole and sew the sleeve back on the shoulder piece. I remove the red thread before I continue. Now it's time to reconnect the sleeves with the body part. Therefore, the easiest way is to use a mannequin. The goal is now to find the right lines to connect the sleeves to the body part. I do that by simply pinning the sleeves inside of the bustier part and folding the edges the way how I want them to be. In the front, I again want it to line up with the other front seams of the cup and the body part. Then I trace the edges with a removable fabric marker. After making sure I have marked everything properly, I remove the sleeve again. Now I have my lines I want to work with. To that I add another 2 cm because of the seam allowance and I cut it out. To be sure the second sleeve has the exact same shape, I will copy the lines from the first sleeve to the other one. I flip one of the sleeves around and push them into each other so that all seams line up. I secure them with pins so that nothing moves. Now I can cut back the other sleeve on the exact same line than the first one. Before I reconnect the sleeves to the body, I need to do 2 more things. First, I need to finish the raw edges that will be the shoulder part of the neckline. I fold it over twice by 0.5 cm, secure it with pins and sew it on with a straight top stitch. The second thing is sewing on the zipper to the back of the top, so I can open the back of the bustier like a jacket. So far I only sew it on the outside fabric and not yet the lining. Now I can sew the sleeves onto the outside part. I again am very careful and use more pins than I would usually do to make sure that it is all lined up perfectly. Now it's finally time to attach the lining with the outer piece. I start by folding down the sleeves to have access to the upper seam. That's why I also attach the lining, so the sleeves will be sandwiched between the lining and the outside fabric. I sew along the zipper and the upper edge of the top in one go. The center front I still leave open at that point. Then I cut back the seam allowance and cut away the edge on top of the zipper and flip the whole piece to the right side. I am almost finished, just a few last steps. It's finally time to add the boning to the outer part of the bustier. The seam allowance that was top stitched 7 mm next to the main seam is now a tunnel for the boning. I cut the boning to the appropriate length, making sure the boning is 1 cm shorter than the bustier because I still need to tuck in 1 cm on the bottom. To finish the center front of the lining, I need to unsew the button facing to slide the lining between the 2 layers and then top stitch it back together. On the bottom line, the edge of the outer fabric and the lining are getting folded inward. Then everything is being top stitched in one go. The button facing is not able to stay straight with the tension a bustier corset has to endure, and it will constantly pop open if I won't secure it with a stitch. So I close the front opening with an extra top stitch. That's why I initially decided to have a zipper in the back. I put one last top stitch along the upper edge of the bustier to define the edge a bit more. Now, finally, I am proud to present you my upcycled bustier corset with the puffy sleeves. As a quick reminder, this is how it looked before, and this is how it looks now. Tell me how you like it in the comments, and thanks for watching, and I hope you liked my video. If you made your own version of this project, I am more than happy to see your results on Instagram or on here. If you like my work, please subscribe to my channel and share my video. Thank you for your support. I see you next time. Bye!